Welcome to Does It Make a Sound, the podcast where we ask if an indie band pours their heart and soul into making a record, but nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? I'm your host, Dustin Owens, and I'm joined by my fellow masculinists, co-hosts and Fall Down Trees bandmates, Porkchop Branch and Nolin McAlister. How are you, fellers?
Doing great.
Great.
In this first season of Does It Make a Sound, we're going to go through our debut album, Night Terrors, with one song per episode, and this just so happens to be Episode 7, Deadbeat Dads. Go listen to Night Terrors on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Tidal, and anywhere you can stream music for free. If you haven't listened to the other episodes in Season 1, we also recommend you starting with Episode 1, Hand of God. So go listen to the record and then start on Episode 1 of the podcast, and you'll get the full listening experience. Make sure to like and subscribe to Does It Make a Sound. Please give us a review. We've gotten a couple of reviews since I've begged on the last couple of episodes. So thank you folks that reviewed us, regardless of how what you rated us. I didn't even look, but I'm sure it was great. Follow Fall Down Trees on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If you've got feedback for us for the show or for the album or anything, send us an email, falldowntrees@gmail.com. All of this is still a work in progress. Everything we do is a work in progress, and we'll never stop working on it, but we'll also never be perfect. That's not what we're here for, folks. You want to see the scars. Proud partners of Guttersville Records is what we are. Cowlick Moon's Shit Kicker coming out real soon, maybe by the time this podcast drops. Also, Biscuit, Southern Pine Feel Good Vibes coming up in June as well. So make sure to follow all the socials for Guttersville and keep up with all of the new releases coming your way from our little indie record label. Does It Make a Sound also has a playlist on Spotify called the Does It Make a Sound playlist. It's on the Fall Down Trees page. Nolin is archiving the songs that we mentioned during the show, and I am putting them on the playlist. If songs aren't on there that we talked about on the show, it is entirely Nolin's fault.
Absolutely.
Also, links in the show notes for anything that we reference and we want to point you towards, so you can check the show notes for that. If anything's missing from the show notes, that is entirely my fault. All right, so Deadbeat Dads is the 7th song on the album and the 6th song recorded? That doesn't seem right. Maybe my notes are wrong there. I feel like it's 7 and 7. I don't know. Whatever. So, very first fact that I delivered during the show is questionable.
It's questionable.
Questionable at best. It's kind of interesting. Every one of these shows has its own personality, and it makes sense. We wanted all the songs to kind of have their own personality too, right? They are widely varying in length and in subject matter. Some of them are more focused on like the recording of the music and playing clips, or lots of different versions of the songs in the past and all of this. Some of them are heavy, like on an emotional level. I'm going to go ahead and just forewarn everybody that this one's probably going to be one of the latter. So if you were listening to Shadow or Water Finds Its Way and you said, wow, this is deeper than I wanted to go in a podcast about an album from a band that I've never heard of, we're about to go even farther than that. So just brace yourselves. This song dates back to at least February of 2017. So that was the first version of that song that I could find. I don't think that we played it with the band or anything, though, until much later down the road. And, well, we'll talk more about that. The song itself was inspired by situations that a few of my friends were going through at this point in time. And about as heavy as life gets. And, and I'm kind of watching, from a friendly distance, these guys just really, really struggling. Losing my kids in any kind of way is my worst nightmare. There's not anything that haunts me more than that. And watching that happen to people that I know was even more terrifying and heartbreaking, right? Anytime you see somebody else suffer in that way, like you feel for them empathetically, but also it hits closer to home, and things like that seem so much more real. I kind of made a masculinist joke at the beginning of the podcast. The fact that I don't know that is a thing, and if it is, it's laughable. I think that tells you a little bit, about the situation. I'm a dad, and I feel like a pretty solid one. And one thing that I've noticed a lot of since I've become one is how those stories are seldom told, right? And, there's kind of this running joke, like you watch a commercial and dad's always like lost at the grocery store and doesn't know where to find stuff. And, it's kind of the Homer Simpson dad, is often portrayed. And a lot of the music that we love, like the position of fathers is usually bad. Something that your dad did, or, you ran off and, left your family, or whatever the case may be. You don't hear like a lot of like these like good dad stories, and you definitely don't hear a lot of sympathy placed in those positions. That doesn't mean that I feel that, this is formulaic in any way, right? But there are tragic stories in this regard that I feel like are pretty underrepresented in music and art and entertainment, across the board. Especially like there's kind of a thing that sort of cracks me up. Like the good single dad is a thing that you almost never see in the media. If a divorced man is portrayed, he's always like overcoming just how shitty he is like the crux of the story, and then there's like the widower. Like a widower is like the in every romantic situation ever in the history of the world, like that's the unicorn that is always portrayed. But the divorced dad, he's always having to like overcome these things. The dudes that I knew that were in these situations were good dudes, right? And they were good dads, and I'd seen them in action, and they desperately, with everything that they had, wanted to be involved in their kids' lives. And the situations that they had found themselves in, they were powerless. And a lot of this was because of their horrible partners, right? And in any relationship, there two sides to every story, right? Like, there's not going to be a good guy and a bad guy and a clear-cut line. It's not white hats and black hats. Everybody has their part in those things falling apart. But ways that people behave shows you the quality of them as a human being. And I'm telling you, looking from the outside in, discussing friends who I have called on their bullshit over the years when they've been behaving that way, their responses versus their partners in those situations was far and away better. They were being abused. And the thing that was being used to abuse them was their time with their children. I cannot think of a more horrible way for a person to behave than that. Not only is that just the cruelest thing that you can possibly do to a person, but also you're doing it to your children.
Exactly.
I cannot think of anything more despicable than that. I really can't. And that was the situations that I was seeing, and that was the thing that was breaking my heart. They were powerless in these situations. And the thing that made them powerless was their love for their kids. Anyway, that's where I was at when I sat down to write this very cheerful number called Deadbeat Dads. And I'm going to play you a demo version of the song. This dates back to February the 19th, right after Valentine's Day. This is my greatest Valentine's Day song in 2017.
What good is an apology if you don't really mean it? If it's not a sincere plea to forgiveness? What good is calling it the past if we have to relive it? Is it really love at all if you can take it away? Just think of all the deadbeat dads that never had a chance. Never had a chance.
So one of the things that's going to kind of be a theme of this episode is when you're trying to convey an emotion and you don't have the words to accomplish it, right? And that was a thing that I ran into so much, like with this song, is no matter what I wrote down, I didn't feel like it expressed enough what it was that I was trying to do. And, you know, you can take people with certain voices, and I always think of a guy like Otis Redding. Have you ever heard him do the Coca-Cola commercial?
Yes.
All right. So Otis Redding does a Coca-Cola commercial. It will break your heart. Like, he could sing an ad for Coke and the Coca-Cola, and just the way that he can convey himself through his voice, like, hits you on an emotional level. That is not like that's not my strongest suit. And usually it's words, and in certain situations, things that you think should inspire art. Like, there's this idea with an artist, it's their anguish that makes them create, right? But if you're in the midst of that, at least I, for one, don't often do that, right? Like, it's afterwards and after the fact that I can look back and do it in a reflective way. And a lot of that is because seldom do the words or the song feel like they properly convey whatever heavy emotion it is that I'm feeling. But I do try to bring that in other ways, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about music, right? Is it has, not only do you have the words there and you have the voice, but you have this sort of palette in the background that lets you set a mood, and it lets you layer these other things on top to get a full emotional impact across. And that's why you can have songs with people singing fa 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 and it still be emotionally impactful, right? Is because you may be missing the words part of that, but there's so much strength in everything else that's around it. And so one of the things I was doing here from the very beginning to try to like convey the emotions and the anguish is I wrote the song in a key that was at the very top of my vocal range. And that's something that well, there will be an instance in a few minutes where I do it a little differently, but from the start, that was something that I wanted to do because I wanted that sort of pleading feel in the lyrics. The problem is it's hard to do that, and it doesn't always sound great when you do it. You know, there's like this line where your voice can break in certain spots, and you can do it in a certain way, and it's really effective, and you do it in a slightly different way, and it just sounds like ass. As far as the lyrics go, here in the first verse, it's really kind of directed towards the partner, right? Like, what good is an apology if you don't really mean it? Holy shit, like, how many times has everybody, you know, felt that way? I think that's a pretty smoking, like, opening line to the tune. It shows a certain level of desperation too, like in that first verse, to hold the relationship together. And in the chorus, it's revealed it's not the relationship that they're worried about losing, right? And the song very much does read as a relationship, like, breakup type song. But the chorus and the crux of the song is, think of all the deadbeat dads that never had the chance, right? And to me, that's sort of the twist. The second verse focuses more like on the system itself, right? What good is an authority as a formulaic equation? I went back and forth dozens of times between whether it should be a formulaic equation or a formulaic expression. I don't know what the correct answer is, but equation rhymed better. So I went with that.
I kind of like equation.
Mathematically speaking.
Yeah, I mean, because
I write lots of math songs. Like, that's a theme.
Well, were you good in math in school?
Relatively, when I paid attention.
I like that. It makes it seem like with an equation, it's a definite thing. If you express something, everybody expresses it differently.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Like, I mean, it's almost scientific. Like, this should be easy to figure out, you know.
Well, I'm glad I made the right choice. Or at least you had a good story to back me up. Another part of that second verse is the DNA part, right? And that is a thing, like on this record, that it's carried through multiple songs, right? Not just that, but the third and final verse, which we'll get to a little bit later, references the rest of the album too. But the importance of step parents, like, you know, I've mentioned my stepdad Doug a few times on this record. I can't imagine like what my life would be if I didn't have Doug in it. He's been such a huge part and a huge supporter of me, and just, you know, all the love in the world that I could have ever asked for from a blood parent. And that was another part, you know, of this song and the things that I was sort of seeing happen to these people that I knew. This idea that DNA trumps all. The second half of the second verse, as I mentioned, wouldn't be finalized until several years down the road. Kind of going back to the music, the chord progression is outside of my usual box, right? I don't know. I don't have like a good reference point for what inspired me to write it. But it reminds me a little bit of like the Beatles or Pink Floyd or Radiohead.
Radiohead's who I thought of when you first brought the song to us. That's who I
mean, I am doing my best like Tom York impression with my. I mean, I have a much lower voice, so high to me is low for him. But yeah, that's obviously what I'm trying to do there.
Yeah, and who doesn't like Creep?
Yeah, absolutely, right. It's great music. I mean, Pink Floyd, like Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh yeah.
And then the other band was the Beatles, but you know, like, I love that kind of spacey, airy music though. Like, that is something I do really enjoy. One thing here that sort of stands out to me about this song, and this might have been why I came up with this chord progression, is music from the three bands that I mentioned. They do a lot of like using the same major chord and minor chord in the song, right? And so this one uses a B7 chord in the verse, and then a moment later in the verse goes back around to a B minor chord, and so it's using a major and a minor of the same chord in the same song. I do that again in the chorus, so you hear it at the very end of the chorus. I play a F major and then I play a F minor right behind it, and that's what kind of resolves it back into the next part of the song. This was a dark tune. Like, I knew after I wrote it and how it was written and everything, like, it's not a fun song to play, right? Mm-hmm. Even dark songs that we've mentioned on here before, like a song like Night Terrors, that song's a lot of fun to play.
Oh yeah,
very fun
right?
to play.
A song like Shadow is fun to play.
Oh yeah.
Like, this song is not. Like, it's like you feel that heaviness, or at least I do, every time I go to play the song. It's really hard to sing, like, both physically, like to do that with my voice in a live setting. It's hard enough to just do it sitting in the room, but also like on an emotional level, like hard to like express like you have to lay yourself so bare and be so vulnerable to sing that song that way. And that's really hard to do in front of an audience. It's probably not as much for me now, but it definitely would have been in 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
Right. I've dealt with I got too much other scar tissue to worry too much about that one anymore. Obviously, I'm sitting here on this podcast just bearing my soul. So we didn't really play it much live. I didn't really play it much around the house. Like, it wasn't a sit on the porch and strum your guitar type tune either, and I forgot it. So I wrote it in 2017, and I do very specifically remember in 2019, I was like, I used to have this song called Deadbeat Dads. It probably came back to me. I don't know why it came back to me in 2019, but that was the next time I saw these recordings. I had to learn it again from scratch. And one of the reasons I know that is because now there are a lot of voice notes that were written later of me saying the names of the chords over the music instead of just playing it and assuming I would be able to listen and figure out my own song. It's not that I didn't have versions of it. I was just not a good enough guitar player to listen to myself play it and know what chords it was that I was playing in the song. You know how frustrating that is?
That stinks when that happens.
Then you have to make sure you don't have a capo on.
That's right. Yeah, you're just like, where was that thing? Like, what chord am I playing here?
That's the way I play the bass all the time, though.
Is that, well, that's good. It keeps you sharp, I guess.
What's the chords? What key are we in?
What key are we in?
You know,
what's the first note of the song? If you can just give me the first one.
Somebody told me the other day a quick joke to lighten the mood a little bit in this heavy episode. They told me I was a prison bass player.
A prison bass player?
That's what they told me. And I said, what is that? What is a prison bass player? They said, you're always behind a couple of bars looking for a key. And I was like, that's perfect. That's exactly what I am. That's beautiful.
I'm going to start referring to it as the prison bass. So starting in May of 2019, I started messing around with the song again. I finally figured out what the chords are after a couple of months. And then I started messing with the second half of that second verse. And I had it pretty solid by September of 2020, which of course would have been in my like COVID rewrite era too, where a lot of these songs were rewritten.
What good is authority as a formulaic equation? Shouldn't love and participation trump DNA? We're all victims of circumstance. Man made God in his image. In spite of my patriarchal privilege, I'm not made of stone. Just think of all the deadbeat dads that never had a chance. Never had a chance.
So I tried something a little different with my voice there. I was singing sort of in a lower register during the verse and then went higher in the chorus. It didn't have the same effect, and it was also making me work a lot harder than I already was having to work in a song where I was having to work really hard to sing it. So what you hear in the second half of that verse, the next line, man made God in his image. That is another thing that's sort of referenced in several of the tunes over the course of the record, is this sort of chicken and the egg type situation, right? Like man made God, God made man. Is it DNA? Is it nature? Is it nurture? I love the chicken and the egg scenarios. And if you're spending a lot of your time sitting in a shed contemplating life, chickens and eggs are a big part of it. In spite of all my privilege, I'm not made of stone. I think I said patriarchal privilege in that version. I felt like that was probably evident enough in the fact that I was singing the song. I didn't have to mention that it was patriarchal privilege. Just say privilege. The sentiment's definitely still in there. Men are and have been, over the course of history, privileged in a lot of ways. And the perpetrators of the most awful things that have ever happened in the history of the world. All that is true, and all of that is completely deserving. I don't want to in any way trash, like, this is not an anti-feminist song. And that's kind of the I mentioned masculinism earlier. It's if you ask a lot of people what the opposite of feminism is, it would be like misogyny, right? And there's this idea that's analogous, right? That masculinism, or trying to being focused on men, is the opposite of that, is putting women down. And that is definitely not what my goals are here. I just feel like there are certain things that need to have a light shined on them that they often aren't.
The story needs to be told.
That's right. And obviously, like, the advances in social causes. The Me Too movement through the years has been great, and it's much needed progress in the world. But there is an element of that pendulum swing that can paint men out in general to be villains, and that is a thing that happens, and it's a thing that's sad as a guy that has a 7-year-old little boy who up to this point is incredibly well behaved, and I hope he will be for his entire life. I hate to see those. I hate to see the way that masculinity in particular is portrayed, where it has to be even when it's being portrayed in a good way, where it has to be about violence and strength and, hiding and burying your emotions, and these are the things that make you a man, to, the way that it's also portrayed that all men behave in these very bad ways. There's this sort of, the combination of these two things where you're shown this is how you should behave and you're bad if you behave this way. And it's a very conflicting thing, especially, for me when I was younger, right? Like when I was a kid, like a lot of these things that were supposed to make me being good at sports, right? That were supposed to make me like a good boy in the way a man should be and a man should behave, being tough. The way I felt after I killed my first deer, right? And how ashamed of myself I was for feeling that way.
Yeah.
Like there are all of these things that are put on kids, on little boys, that men carry over into their adult lives. And there's some things that ways that society has shifted, and then there's some ways that we're still so stuck in how things used to be, in these sort of traditional gender roles and expectations of the way that people behave, and that's in the law, right? And that's also in culture.
Well, I can kind of speak to that from, being a young boy that grew up without a father. You kind of miss those little, people call it toxic traits that men have nowadays. You kind of miss that, but, it takes a village.
Fathers are very important to kids. Yes. And whether it's in that sort of traditional way, like I think about like roughhousing and stuff, right? Yeah. Like things that, but even beyond that, to have a balance in your parents, and to have two parents, right? And have that, and have a relationship with each is just incredibly important to any kid, right? And I think a lot of that gets lost. Men are expected to sort of neglect their needs for their families too. And this idea through the law, like deferring to women when it comes to raising children, these are still things that are pushed on men through the law as well as through culture. If you look at like the high suicide rates among men now, and untreated depression, and a lot of this is that bottling your emotions up inside, pushing through, dealing with the most difficult things in life that are still placed on our shoulders today. I'm a pretty left-leaning guy. I kind of feel probably that I'm more centrist, but based on where I live, that puts me pretty far to the left. What I believe that we should strive towards is equality and equity, and not trying to create laws that punish. And I think in the current political climate, everything that seems to be happening is about punishment and keeping power so I can not be punished later on, protecting myself and punishing somebody else. I think we've lost our way, not just in mainstream politics, which has never really like appealed to me, but also the sort of grassroots stuff, the advocacy. So much of that is now focused on that punishment and retribution now, instead of kind of ignoring that and actually working towards common goals that bring everybody up in general.
And two, if you've got the opportunity in certain situations, I mean, there's no nuance to figuring out who deserves the punishment and retribution. Everybody deserves it.
That's right.
And I think, especially in personal situations, that's where you can apply some knowledge that you already have about a situation or what you can view, and then use that nuance to it makes it more individual, and it makes it more I don't want to use the word fair, but it makes whatever's getting ready to happen fair for that situation.
Yeah. Yeah, so what good is authority as a formulaic equation, right? When we start like lumping people together into groups and then defining them by those groups,
there's a side of story. Like, everybody has a story, and there's two sides, maybe three, and everybody has their own story, and you don't know it until you sit down and talk about it.
Agreed. For me, like, thinking of all this and like how the meaning of this song changed through the years, right? Because when I'm writing it, I'm empathetic, but I'm not the person that's singing the song, right? Like, I'm writing this for people that I know. I didn't realize how much the meaning of this song would shift and change as my life changed. And as I shift from this, like, talking about how difficult it can be for men in the world today, into how this song had meaning for me personally, I want to have like a little bit of a disclaimer here. Is I've been incredibly lucky, right? Like, my ex and I have a good relationship post-divorce. We co-parent with the kids. We have equal time. There hasn't been any of this fighting that I've had to deal with, and I haven't had to. All of these things that I see externally happening in the world were not things that up to this point I've had terribly to deal with, other than like trying to get the school to call me, because I live across the street instead of calling their mom who works, 20 minutes away. Things like that, very light. What's the male version of misogyny? There can't be a word for that, right?
It doesn't exist.
It would be ridiculous. Anyway, yeah. So I do want to say, before I get into this, I have been incredibly lucky. These aren't things that happened to me, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. But heading into my divorce, I was unsure about all of this, right? And I felt like I felt so out of control with what was going on around me. Not like out of control in my behavior, but like I had no control of what was going to happen, right? Like I felt like I had lost all of that. I felt like I didn't really know, like, my ex anymore. Like, I didn't know her as a person, and therefore I couldn't judge what she would do or what she wouldn't do. I had lost confidence in myself and in society. A lot of the societal confidence is still lost. Leading up to all this, and I don't know how much I've touched on this in the podcast, but I went from, I got an incredibly good job that allowed me to take care of my family and us advance in a way that we didn't realize we would ever have the ability to do. To getting laid off and then being unable to find a job in my sector, having to work multiple jobs at once while I watched my marriage fall apart, and then having to sell my house to keep from going completely under, and then getting divorced, right? So it's like this huge swing from sort of the top of the mountain to the bottom of the valley over the course of about 6 months. All of that, like, the effect that had on my confidence and my ability to make good decisions, and me questioning that, like, that was really tough, and I was really scared. And the song sort of started to take on this new meaning as I was kind of contemplating what was about to happen, right? Like, as I saw it coming, right? I didn't realize, like, at first how much the meanings of songs can change based on the things that are happening in your life. And this was the thing, like, I've mentioned this, most of the songs that are on this record weren't written to be on this record, right? They sort of got retconned in, right? Like, retroactively those meanings changed. The next recording, like, I remember this day. I was kind of working my way through this song, and I was sitting at my desk in the house and recording a demo, and my ex, like, storms past me. as I'm playing the song and like straight out of the house. And it dawned on me like in that moment, like the lyrics of this song and how this must have sounded to her hearing me sing it, and especially the way I'm singing it, like from the other room. And I'm sure she had heard it in the past, but she had never heard it in this context.
Just think of all the deadbeat dads that never had a chance. Never had a chance.
Jingle bells?
No, that's her storming out of the house. I used to have the bells hanging on the back of the door.
You wonder where have all the good guys gone? They're sitting at home alone.
So that one was from November of 2022, and and we separated in January of 2023. So we're talking like right in the midst. We had not yet had a conversation about it yet, but I think it was probably pretty apparent. I will say I was pretty naive about what was happening. I knew like we were in a bad spot, being laid off, working all the time, still struggling with money, like all of these stresses like piling up. Like I obviously knew all of those things, but I couldn't imagine actually splitting up. Like my parents divorced when I was a kid. Like that was tough on me. I swore like that wouldn't happen. Like I wouldn't let that happen. But the thing is, like, the difficult thing about a relationship with the person is that you both have to be moving in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't that doesn't mean like one person's going one way and one person's going the other way. It may just be that one person's standing still, right? And the other person's moving a different direction. And there's no way for a person like me that gets in a tough spot in my first reactions to try to take control of the situation. This one, you're just spiraling, and all I could do was hang on. Like there wasn't a way to take that on myself. Over time, it did become apparent, but it took a while for me to get to that place, right? To get to that spot. One of the things that one of the most difficult parts of that was like my usual outlet for things like that was writing and playing, and that was kind of taken away from me. I couldn't I couldn't bare my soul and like write what I really how I really felt, partially because I didn't have those words. Like I didn't feel like anything that I could write could fully express it, but also like I couldn't say those things out loud. Like I couldn't say them in my house, like I couldn't write a song and play it, play it in secret like that. It was like, because she was there and I had now discovered like how much pain like trying to do this would cause, it sort of made me feel like I couldn't express it in that way. And I also didn't want to speak those things out loud, right? Like it's like if you speak them out loud, they become real. If you write it down, that's permanent. Like that's a thing that doesn't go away. That's a thing you can't, back out of. And that was a thing that I really dealt with at this point in time. We got the rain back again this week. It sounds like it's picking up pretty heavy. Something about the dark subject matter, I guess. When I start getting emotional, the gods begin to weep. So anyway, I found this voice. I kind of turned to voice notes at this point in time. I was doing a lot of, like I mentioned, driving around and kind of picking up side jobs anywhere I could, and spent a lot of time listening to music, and then a lot of time listening to podcasts, a lot of time thinking, and then a lot of time spouting my thoughts. So this is kind of a long one, but this is something I came across when I was listening to these recordings, and it was about this. Like it's kind of me thinking about where I was and sort of speaking some things out loud for the very first time. So, when I was younger, this has been the case with so many artists, like mining relationship issues for song content is a thing to do, right? Like your emotional connection to what's going on. If you can be sincere, like, I mean, Taylor Swift has made a career out of this, right? Like, and I've certainly written plenty of mine through the years, sometimes trying to hurt people if they hear it, like, in a lot of different ways. But, you know, my songwriting is generally revolves around what I'm going through at this moment, right? Like, what's on my mind. Sometimes it's not personal. Sometimes it's a story that I read that I found to be really interesting, or, you know, some philosophical idea that's going through my head. Like, there are 1,000 different things that I write about. But over the last few years in particular, you know, I've really kind of suffered from this writer's block. And I think because most of my emotional, like, energy is so wrapped up in the struggles with my relationship, and I can't write about it, like, not in a way that I could before when I was younger and lived with my parents or lived by myself or didn't live with the person that I was struggling with. And oftentimes these things are easier to deal with in hindsight than they are while they're actually happening. But this has been going on for so long, and there are songs now where there are lines in these songs. She even made a comment when I was singing Tending the Fire the other day, how it sounds so much more melancholy than it used to. And I think it's right, it does, because that song has a different meaning now. Like, used to, that song kind of praised the challenge, and now it really does, like, look at it in this way, like, poets all praise the flames of desire, but what do they know about tending the fire? Like, now there's a bitterness to it that didn't used to exist, and she notices that, and she hears me play, and she knows songs, like, when I'm writing them, like, I can't do this, like, here with her around, which is also a struggle for me, because this is a way that I process my thoughts and a way that I deal with my emotions. And I struggle doing that. And also, what I do doesn't just affect me. Like, I can't be as loose with this as I used to be. And I've always, like, tried to hang on to relationships long after they were dead. Like, that's a thing that's always happened. But now, like, this is serious. Like, our kids are involved, and this affects more lives than just mine and just hers, and, like, the financial implications, and, like, there's so much more involved in it that I have to tread carefully. But at the same time, it's a real struggle not to be able to write about these things as they're happening, and get them off my chest in a way. And it's kind of a sick thought that, like, I've sort of reached a point where I feel I need to prepare to write these songs because I think that I'm gonna have to. You know, I think a thing that is, there's, like, this romance that's often portrayed in art and in music, and these little cliches that people say, you know, art is suffering. And, you know, man, I remember, like, when Ryan Adams went through rehab and got clean, and he posted this comment, you know, on Twitter or something, and one of the first comments I saw when I looked at it was, your music was better when you were strung out. And it's like this is a game, right? And it sounds, I know all this stuff that I'm talking about, like, it sounds overwrought, like, it sounds over dramatic, right? But, like, playing that guitar and writing music and playing songs I'm not, like, I don't say this lightly, like it has saved my life.
Same.
Like it is a thing that really matters deeply to me in how I approach the world since I was, 18 years old, I guess, right? Like it has been a part of every day of my life and the way that I've learned to cope and deal with things. And there's nothing romantic about living through difficult times for the sake of art.
Nope.
People, you hear Taylor Swift get made fun of a lot for this, right?
Yeah.
Like this idea she goes through these relationships so she has something to write about. That's a very flippant way to look at things, right? You don't ruin your life for the art. The art is the result of the times that you're living
exactly.
in. And like it's not a game. It can be, and we definitely have fun with it, right? And we definitely have fun doing it. But in the grand scheme of things, like the words matter, and they can hurt or help people and affect people. The emotion of the music matters. Like it is a thing that exists and has an effect on people, and it has an effect on the people that are playing it too. And the art itself isn't just a thing that can come or can go. Like it is a life-saving thing for people. It is a thing that is incredibly important to people and necessary in that way.
Yeah, I'll 100% agree with that. You don't know how many times music has, saved me from depression, looking down on myself. He's like, I can do something. I can do something.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, the art, like the music, it helped me heal. And I knew that when I was making that voice note. Like that was the realization that I was having, is like, this is a thing that I'm going to need. I didn't quite know yet like how intense and necessary it was when we were making this record and like rewriting these songs and recording and spending times with these songs. Like that was how I processed and healed.
Yeah.
Those were those moments that
Yeah, it helped me out a ton. More than you would probably even, ever know.
Right? It's the time, right? Mm-hmm. Like it gives you something to do, a distraction for this block of time.
Exactly.
It's the fellowship, like playing with you guys and like having a core group of friends that you're spending time with. But also, and this is going to sound very dudeish of me, it's also having fellowship without having to deal with the bullshit that you're dealing with, right? Like we didn't show up at band practice and spill our guts about all the terrible shit that was going on in our lives, and we all went through difficult stretches over the course of making this record. That wasn't the discussions that we were having here. We were checking in with each other, but we came in here and played, man, and like that was the healing part of it was in the music.
Yep. And then there's locker room talk. We talk like guys do.
That's right. That too. You get to vent in a way that you can't even, you guys think we're being raw on the microphone here. You should hear what it's like when the mics aren't on.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's also what you mentioned there, like getting my confidence and like my self-worth back, right? Like talk about going from the top of the mountain with my really good job and bought my house and like everything was going right to the bottom of the valley when everything went wrong to then taking everything that came out of all the stuff that went wrong and funneling it into this project and accomplishing something that we haven't done before, right? Yeah. Like achieving a level of artistic expression and accomplishment that we had never achieved up to this point. And once again, like, I've joked a lot about how we go on and on here about how great we are. That's not the way that we feel. We are just really proud of what we accomplished here. And that's not just in the work, but also the things that we overcame to be able to achieve it and to get to where we are and to be able to have a thing that is not just our musical abilities, but also like our emotions and everything wrapped up into it in songs that really mean something to us.
Yeah, and I don't think if it wasn't for our fellowship, like how good of friends that we became in the past 15 years.
Yeah,
it's like I don't think we could have pushed each other to make something this profound and creative.
Early on in the process, like we didn't have that bond either.
No, yeah. And every time, like, because coming into a band like this, which is, you know, was back in the day was pretty much country heavy.
Right.
I didn't know my spot for a long time in this band, but you guys just pushed me and kept pushing me and kept pushing me, and I was like, okay, I'm comfortable with these guys. I can tell they don't mean me no harm, and I'm open. I'm open to be creative and do the best I can do. So the creative juices started flowing again. I got my confidence back. I have a core group of friends I can vent to if I need to. But also, we're just, it's a good, healthy relationship that we all have together.
The same goes for me, but from a slightly different angle, right? Like, I've always written these tunes, and that's been like that's what I've always wanted to do, right? Like, I wanted to be Bob Dylan. I wanted to have that harmonica rack around my neck and be that poet, right? I wanted the words to jump off the page if you read them, not just work through the music, And every band that I've ever been in, I've been so damn determined that we were an original band.
Yeah.
We were playing original music, and even the covers we played were obscure and like off the mark, and I was real pretentious about all that for a really long time. And it led to no success whatsoever, right? Like, hard to keep people in the band with you if you're not making any money, right? Like, it's hard to work towards these to get these gigs if you're not going to play the songs everybody wants to hear, like all of this kind of stuff. And the thing with you guys is, like, that confidence that instills in me, that it's worth y'all putting in your time and putting forth so much effort in the investment that you put in to play these songs that I'm writing, or write songs with me in your case too, Porkchop. Like, that puts a confidence in me, but it also puts a sense of responsibility on me. And I work so much harder because of that, right? Because, like, you guys have put that faith in me, and I want to live up to that, right? And that means a ton. That means a ton to me. And suffering is the part that happens outside of the room, and it's definitely not intentional, but it's just a part of life. But to be able to bring it into the room, into the shed, and process it and get it out of your system is invaluable to me, like, as a human, and how I cope with the world.
Well, I'm going to throw this in there because you're talking about suffering. It took me a minute to find this. It's not committed to memory, and I don't want to sound pretentious, but this is probably one of the quotes that sticks with me over the years. It's from Kierkegaard. It's about poets, and I think it applies here. It said, "A poet is an unhappy being whose heart is torn by the secret sufferings, but whose lips are so strangely formed that when he sighs and cries escape them, they sound like beautiful music." And then he goes on to say that people will gather around the poet, even if he's not suffering, and say, "Suffer again," and I'm paraphrasing, "Suffer again so we may hear the beautiful music."
Yeah.
I mean, that's... I usually post that every year on social media. I don't do any kind of controversial post on social media, but it's usually about music or history or both. And I do that on Hank Williams' birthday because I think it applies to him. But I think it applies in this case, too. You're talking about Ryan Adams earlier, to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think it applies to just what you're talking about. Like, you come up with a song, whether it's personal or whether you see it happening to somebody else, and people want this, whatever the magic pieces that were there that made that beautiful music. They're almost like, it doesn't matter. We want the end result.
That's right.
We don't want to know how the sausage is made, but we like the end product.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that it's the pain, right? And it is it's the relatability too. So it's the relatability of the music that really sets them off, that makes people bond with the song in that way. And so that's also camaraderie, right? Like, it's also that sort of shared shared pain, and it is suffer with me. Please suffer with me again.
Yeah, trauma bonding.
It is. Music is just trauma bonding. All right, good. Well, I'm glad we got to the core of that. That is a beautiful quote, Porkchop. Thanks for sharing that. In the concept of the record, this song represents my greatest fear. of all of the things that I cover here in the night terrors and the terrors that I have and the things that keep me awake and the things that wake me up, like this is the biggest one, regardless of all of the existential threats and all of the other things that are being covered and the meaninglessness of life. It is the thing that gives me meaning in life, being stripped away. Also this idea that I'm causing them pain for my own benefit. And I think that's a thing that kind of pops up in Pegasus, a little bit later on, and we'll talk more about that. But that is like knowing what I'm putting them through and making that decision anyway. Like torturing myself is a thing I've never bothered doing and I've never minded doing.
Exactly.
And and a lot of times felt like it was well deserved. But to do that to the people that I love more than anything in the world, it's a heavy thing. Therefore, you're going to make an album and you're going to call it Night Terrors, and this is what it's going to be about. It was pretty much guaranteed to be a core part of the record. We did start playing it live with Jonah and the Fall Down Trees band when we were kind of prepping for the record, and it obviously, what Jonah does here on the drums adds a lot to the drama, at least, of the tune.
We're all victims of circumstance, man-made God in his image. In spite of all my privilege, not made of stone. Just think of all the deadbeat dads who never had a chance. Never had a
Finally found that resolve note there, didn't you know?
Yeah, no, it took me a little bit.
I was playing that jailhouse bass too.
So this is like the birth of the guitar solo on this song. I know that we played around with it with a sax solo for a long time, but it always felt like the guitar was like the most personal sort of extension of the song, right? And especially in the concept of the record, kind of going back through where the saxophone is the external forces sort of bearing down, pushing the character around, whether it's like in a soft, smooth way, pushing them towards nostalgia, or a more aggressive way, like on Night Terrors, and it's the whole world crashing down around their ears. The guitar is the character sort of fighting back, right? In this song, though, like it's very much taking on the anguish of the character, right? It is the expression of the emotions, and as I mentioned, like no matter how good of a wordsmith I can be or a writer that I can be, and the things that I like to think I've achieved in that regard, I can never fully express everything that I'm feeling through those words, and I'm not a strong enough singer. My voice doesn't work in that way to do it vocally either. I'm limited in that regard, and I'm limited as a guitar player too, but it lets me sort of express like this pure emotion, right? Like it lets me, it's like that stuff can flow through my fingers in a way that I can't capture in the words. I think the greatest soloists, my favorite guitar players or whatever instrument, like of all time, they're the ones that can hit those emotional marks kind of on cue. I'm not that level of a guitar player. Obviously, in that version we just heard, I was in a spot, right? Like
Yeah.
I found a groove in that solo and I let it rip. That was probably that's why I played it. I listened to a bunch of them and that was by far the best one. But it's hit or miss with me, right? If you think about guys like Dwayne Allman, I think is the best example of this on a guitar. He plays, I think Dickie Betts is probably a more technically proficient guitar player. Dickie is a writer. He writes solos kind of like what I end up doing on this song, which is kind of funny. Dwayne plays with his guts.
It's emotion.
It is, and he captures that in a way that I don't know any other guitar player ever has. And he does it every live record you hear. He hits that mark, right? Like he hits that note. He could pull that out of himself at any point in time. For me, like, seldom can I pull a solo as good as that one right out of my ass, right?
Yeah.
Like it happens sometimes, but not all the time. And so I decided I was going to write a solo in a way that I could kind of develop that muscle memory and then hopefully take that muscle memory and then express myself, right? Where my fingers know where they're going and it's not quite so erratic. So I did it Dickie Betts style. What you're going to hear in this voice note is going to be the rhythm guitar. I did a voice note of me playing the rhythm guitar, and then I airdropped it to my computer and played it back through the speakers while I did a second voice note of me playing lead guitar over the top of it. So
Technology.
Poor man's overdubbing is what I did here. But that's the way that I did that's how I wrote the solo. So I did the rhythm track, and then I just sat here and played it over and over and changed and adjusted and changed and adjusted until I had pretty much written it almost exactly like it would end up being on the record. I think I'm actually playing that on the electric guitar without it being amplified.
Yeah. There's a lot of them. Even though you went and did the Dickie Betts style of writing a solo, still a lot of emotion in that.
Yeah, I mean, Dickie's not devoid of emotion,
No,
right? Like,
no.
And I think that is a part of writing it that way. Is melody carries emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sort of creating this. I'm writing a solo in a lyrical way, but then how you're sitting on top of the beat and what notes you're accenting, and then also like in those little bends and pops and stuff, like how much vibrato, how much ass you're putting into that bend, like all those little things. That's what comes out in that performance. But knowing where the fingers are going and having that guide, I think really helps.
I can speak to like whenever I hear like Dustin ripping a guitar solo, I want to be kind of like the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
So like I want to treat it more like not like a battle, more like an argument.
Yeah.
So if we're writing like deep lyrics like this, I want to be that person that you're, arguing with, someone you're struggling with, and I want to try to convey like, I can be that, discouraging person. I can argue back.
Right. Yeah.
And so like when I hear you lay down something so like, tasteful like that, it's like, okay, we're about to have an argument.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm going to be the bad guy in this argument, and I don't mind it at all.
You make a good heel, Nolan.
Yeah.
This song I think does a really good job of that with me and you, because you take the first solo in the tune on the recorded version of the song.
Okay.
And I think in this one, like, you're kind of playing a more smooth role, whereas I'm coming in real raw. But the end of the song, we match at the very end, right? Like I come out of my minor solo, and you're playing in more of a major key, and then we land on that where the tonic would be, like in the major key.
Yeah.
Like we end in a bright note.
I found it eventually. But,
Maybe that last recording isn't the best example of it, but on the record, right? Like what we do on the record, we're kind of pushing and pulling against each other, and right at the end we land right on top of each other.
Because like when you
spot.
write songs like this deep, I don't know the whole backstory and stuff like that. I can just feel the emotion,
right?
And I try to match it.
I wonder, I don't know if the listening audience like has fully grasped this yet, but you guys are hearing all of this for the first time
This is
right?
This is the first time.
I never discussed any of this with y'all like really in advance. Obviously, you were here for the recording process and all of that, but a lot of what we're talking about and a lot of these like demo tracks and tapes and stuff like that, y'all don't know any of this and have never heard any of this either.
No, it's all fresh.
We worked this song out as a 3-piece too, so obviously this was one of our was going to be a core of our set before we began recording. Under the dendrological method, Porkchop's acoustic guitar is the roots here on this recording. The keys are the trunk, and my electric guitar is the branches. This is also kind of where we developed the arrangement to the song that would make its way onto the record. 2, 3, 4. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
What good is an apology if we don't really mean it? If it's not a sincere plea for forgiveness.
I think the keys add like a nice texture to the song. Like they give it sort of a thickness there that sort of helps convey the emotion of the tune. I do think though, if we want to look at playing this one live in the future, the way to go is Chop. So you're playing the acoustic guitar there. I would play the electric guitar and then bring Nolin in on the sax and do it like that and play the sax like you do on the record. I think it would work out pretty well. It did make the initial recording process easier. I know, we've talked a good bit about this. Some of these songs weren't arranged at all.
No.
We were making up everything kind of from scratch in the studio, but because we worked this out like as a band, we sort of went into the recording with a pretty good idea of what we were going to do.
Yeah.
I will say this song was intimidating to me. Like this is one I was kind of scared of. It's slow and it's sparse. And so everything you do,
It has to be great.
it does. Like you're going to hear every flaw in it. All that space, like any sour note. With the vocals in particular, right, is like knowing like this one's really hard for me to sing. It's way up there, and somehow I have to sound like I'm falling apart, but hold it together long enough to make it sound good. And then the guitar too, right? Like now here's a guitar solo, and there's no drums to bury it under. Like every note and the texture of every note's going to be on display.
It's a slower solo too. I mean, you've got the
Right,
A lot of times what you play, even if it's a slower blues song, I mean, there's a franticness to it.
Right.
This is precise
and long, like held out notes and it's all right there. It's definitely outside of my usual thing. So April 1st of 2024, I started working on this. So I was a fool. I had acoustic guitar, electric guitar, and vocals. The first night is what I laid down. So I did the acoustic guitar to give me something to play electric guitar over.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. And then sang on top of it. I wasn't happy with any of the guitar work. The vocals were worse. I was pretty pissed off at the entire process. I stayed up until 3 a.m., according to my notes, and I did 51 vocal takes.
Ooh, boy.
Just to end up disappointed with the results. 51 vocal takes of a song that's already a strain. So here, let's let you hear what take number 51 sounded like.
Lord.
We're all victims of circumstance. Man made God in his image. In spite of all my privilege, I'm not made of stone. Just think of all the deadbeat dads that never had a chance. Never had a chance.
I mean, you can hear it. You
Yeah.
can hear 51 takes in my voice right there.
Yeah.
You know, there's a fine line between being like a little fatigued and just completely blown out. I was obviously blown out right there, but you know, like a little fatigue, like it helps, right? Like it makes you pay more attention to what you're doing. It adds like a little bit of grit to what you're doing. A lot of times I'll be overexcited when I first get started, all this kind of stuff. It's kind of like, I always feel like 4 days after I've had a head cold is the perfect time to record. Like when I've still got like a little bit of that graininess to my voice, but I also have like the full range back, and it doesn't sound like I'm holding my nose as I sing. You know, that's like the perfect spot. The recording session the next day with you two did not go very well either. So we decided we were going to throw all that in the trash, and we were all going to start over because it was all terrible. The next week had some stuff pop up, so we canceled the recording session, and I worked on my guitar sound. So this is the moment you've all been waiting for, the story of the pedal board. So I've mentioned this a few times over the course of the recording session, but most of the guitar work on this album was done just going from my Guild Starfire, I think is what it's called, guitar into my Supro Delta King amp, and using the onboard tones. I'd always been pretentious about guitar pedals. Like I'd never, like, you know, I should be able to get everything I want out of my amp. But Porkchop gave me a pedal board. I'd been talking about this. I wanted an onboard tuner, I think is where it all came from. And so your buddy Chad James donated it to the fall down trees.
Yeah, most definitely. He had been using it for a little while and was no longer in need of it. Asked if we could use it, and I said I didn't know. I said, but I know a guy who will know, so I brought it to you, and I said I have no idea what to do with this. So you go ahead.
Yeah, you know less about pedals than I do.
Yes.
I've never been much of a gearhead just in general. I like playing them more than I like getting into the technical specs on them. But so it was a tuner pedal, but there was also what's called a Two Kings overdrive pedal. And so the Two Kings, it's based on a classic guitar pedal. I can't remember what it's called. But it's a kit. So it was this pedal was built from a kit. It didn't, they didn't just buy it at the store. They built it. And it's two different overdrive channels, and you can use it in a lot of different ways, and you can make adjustments on the inside of the pedal for what it is that you want to do. You can use the channel as overdrive, you can use the channel as boost, or you can use it as distortion based on settings inside. So I'm pretty sure Chad was just using it as a boost pedal, like when he would take a lead.
I believe so.
He could kick it up a notch. I started reading about it, diving into it, and I figured out how to reset the pedal to get what I wanted out of it. So I took it almost the opposite direction, and I set both of my switches as overdrive. So that gave me two different overdrive tones. And for folks that don't know what overdrive gives you, that sort of nasty guitar sound, right? Mm-hmm. It gives you the sound of cranking your amp all the way up. And so I had sort of two different levels of that, and then I could kick them both on at the same time, and that gave me the real big, loud, screamy sound. So I made those adjustments to the pedals, and I got that dialed in. I had a loop pedal already that I had bought kind of on a whim at some point in time and had played with a little bit. And what I wanted to be able to do, since it was just the three of us, is I wanted to be able to use the loop for rhythm guitar and then switch over and play lead over the top of that rhythm guitar. So as we were playing as a three-piece, it would almost make us a four-piece band, and my guitar wouldn't drop out while I was taking the lead. And I wanted to be able to use both of my amps, so I wanted to have an acoustic amp for my acoustic guitar and an electric amp for my electric guitar. And then, in addition to this, I get this discount from Earthquaker devices based on my job. And Earthquaker makes some really fantastic pedals. And so the first thing I bought was the switcher pedal. It's called a Swiss Things. And so it has its own built-in boost. And then what it does is it lets me click a button and I can switch from one amp to the other amp playing through my guitar. So that was pretty awesome. And then at the exact same time, I had bought a brand new pair of headphones. So it's the ones I'm wearing right now, DT700 Pro X from Bayer Dynamic. I paid a pretty penny for these things. It was the only major expense for the entire recording of the record. I had everything else, all the mics and everything already. So this is the one thing that I splurged on for the record. And it had a huge, huge effect. So it changed the way I was mixing the songs and the way I was recording, but also just the general quality. So the thing about these headphones, unlike those Skull Candy headphones that you guys use when we record, it is a flat sound. So it doesn't do anything to improve the sound of what you're listening to, right? So those Skull Candies, they'll boost the bass, they'll trim the mids back just a little bit and get that like perfect sound. So the music you're listening to sounds, it's honestly sugar. Like it's just like adding extra sugar to whatever you're drinking to make it easier to process. Mm-hmm. It's kind of cheating. Well, these things are the opposite of that, and they show every flaw. You can hear absolutely everything, every foot tapping on the floor, everything that never comes through in the final mixes. You can hear it through the headphones. And at first, that was weird for me, right? At first, it was like, oh my God, everything that we've done sounds terrible. Why do these headphones suck so bad? But it made me start working on them to fix those things. And what I finally figured out is if you can make it sound good in these headphones, it sounds fantastic everywhere else, right? It lets you fix all of those flaws. Mm-hmm. So the headphones were a big boost. And then obviously I got the beginnings of the guitar pedal. Now, once I started down the pedal road, it took a while for me to get to the end of it. Once I like opened myself up to using a pedal, I splurged a couple of more times too, but we'll get to that in a minute. With the guitar rig dialed in, we got back together again on April the 16th, and instead of staying up all night to cut the vocals, I did them on my lunch break, and I did it in one take.
Hell yeah.
So, lesson learned.
I'm a fan of one takes.
Instead of staying up till 3 a.m. and blowing your voice out, just get up fresh and knock out the Deadbeat Dad vocals. So for this next recording session, Nolin, I think you were late getting over here and came without a sax, but you were here for emotional support that day.
Oh, yeah. I think I remember what was happening.
So Chop and I passed the bass back and forth, working out the bass line. But this is one Chop completely took over and came up with the final line. So I got some notes here on Porkchop's bass playing from this song I'll read to you. Chop and I did the thing where we passed the bass back and forth until he came up with his slipperiest, spaciest bass line yet. It's wild to watch Chop completely change his style on the fly and adapt to the electric. He's advanced as much during these sessions as I have on electric guitar, and maybe even more. It's even more amazing as I sit for hours working on mine while he leaves his bass here during the week. Maybe it's the bluegrass roots, but dude is a quick study. That is true. Porkchop left his bass here in the middle of the week between recording sessions. No practicing that electric at home. You practice on an acoustic guitar, though, right? That's what you do?
No.
We talking about practice?
Let me just. I don't mean to. I really am not a practicer. I mean, when I come to practice, that's practice.
Yeah. Well, that's good, man.
And I do that. That was in band in high school. That's in the bluegrass band. Anybody I've ever played with. What's crazy is I've met one other person that's like this. I'm sure there are others. If you're out there, please make comments because I want to know if there's only two of us in the world.
Well, let me tell you, I've met a lot of musicians that don't practice, but most of them suck. So that's the advantage that you have over the others.
I met a bass player years ago. He progressed quickly. Never had played an instrument and picked up the bass, and within 6 months, it was just amazing. I mean, could play any style. And I said, man, how many hours do you practice a day? And he said, sheepishly, I really don't practice. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, I think about it all the time. And that's what I do. When I'm going down the road, I think about, like, in my head, I can picture the fretboard or the where, you know, or if it's an upright, no frets. Hey, I think I can do this. And first thing I do when I go into real practice with the band is try it.
Huh, that is really interesting.
I haven't met anybody else that does that, but I never was going to admit it until this guy we happened to have a conversation, and it was like, okay, there's somebody. Well, I'm not a unicorn. I mean, there's somebody else out there that does this.
I practice loads.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, Nolan. Sitting around working out your scales.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I write a song, Porkchop. So I like to refer to it as like popping a pimple. Like you keep working it out like in your head, and it keeps getting like more swollen and pussy over time until when you finally go in there, like you barely have to mash it all, and it just comes flooding out on the page.
That's the grossest thing ever. But you know what?
You just got to try really hard not to get any on the bathroom mirror.
I am gonna use that to describe my playing from now on. That's what I'm doing.
All right, so next up, I recorded the electric guitar with everyone in the room. Talk about popping a pimple. So for when I did this, instead of using the pedal setup that I had just gotten and been playing with, I decided I was going to overdub the guitar solo. So I was going to record it at a different time, and the main reason being because I knew I was going to screw up a lot less playing the chords, like strumming the guitar, than I was playing the solo, and I didn't want to have to do the whole take over and over and over again until I got the solo right. So I just dialed in the amp for the rhythm, and what I did was, instead of having the pedal, which would let me start quiet and get louder and then get really loud, I took advantage of the tubes, right? And so during the verse part, I'm playing really quietly, and you'll hear that it's really clean and it's got a nice shimmery reverb to it. And then when I get to the chorus part, I play the strings really hard, and what happens is that extra volume overdrives the amp naturally without having to use a pedal, and it's what they call breaking up, and then that's when you get that kind of distorted sound to it, that real thick heavy sound. But there's no me like hitting a pedal or anything. This is just the difference in how hard I'm strumming the guitar in the two parts. You also hear that cut right at the end, right? That wasn't bad DJ skills on my part. That's what the track actually sounds like. Mm-hmm. So if you listen to that guitar track, it just has a sharp cut right there, because that is the first note of the guitar solo. So then I went back in and cut that solo in over and over again until I got it where I wanted it to be. And the reason that I cut it is I wanted it to sound like one guitar playing throughout, right? I didn't want it to sound like the lead was going over the top of the rhythm guitar. We ended up keeping Nolin's sax parts from the original recording. So I mentioned before how terrible everything sounded, and we decided we were just going to start over from scratch and all of this. Well, I figured out that once we fixed the bass and the rhythm guitar, the sax was perfect. There weren't any issues with the sax. This was the note that I put in my book. Unsurprisingly, the sax sounded good once we had good backing tracks. Fucking Nolin.
I don't talk much, but when I do, somebody has to listen.
That's very true. For the drum part, I recorded this the day that I was dialing in the guitar tone, the day you guys weren't here. I changed it up from the wooden filing cabinet and the box of thumbtacks, and I used a 5-gallon Yeti bucket and a can of Copenhagen on top of my desk. So And I also put in my notes here a quote from Porkchop: "You're going to make Morgan Wallen jealous." A 5-gallon Yeti bucket and a can of Copenhagen. All right, so let's listen to it. Drum isolation coming your way. If you ever wondered what that would sound like. Look, I know there's some folks out there they're calling me bougie because I have a 5-gallon Yeti bucket. All right? There's going to be a spinoff podcast at some point in time. I am a firm believer in buying quality things that last a really long time, and Yeti does that.
There's a whole nother group of people calling you bougie because you've got a Copenhagen can. It's not like Longhorn, you know?
That's the good stuff.
That's right. I buy quality
Top
dip
shelf.
and I buy quality 5-gallon buckets. And that's why I achieved the level of tone that I got. It's that little tin cap instead of the plastic cap that gets you there with the Coke.
All you're missing is an F-250 with like giant rims and
That's
lights.
right. And glass packs.
Yeah.
You'll probably hear one go down the road over the course of recording the podcast. So anyway, I also cut the electric solo in the studio with you guys. So the same day that I did the electric rhythm guitar, I cut the solo in front of you guys. Porkchop was the engineer. He ran the computer while I was doing it and helped me out. I was kind of nervous, like playing in front of everybody, but also anytime I recorded in front of you guys, I kind of felt like I was wasting studio time. And then the other side of it is like, I do 51 vocal takes, and Porkchop figures out an electric guitar and knocks it out in 5 minutes without taking it home to practice. You know, Nolin knocks out the solo to Modern Prometheus in one freaking take. And so my process is so much different than y'all's. Is having y'all sit here and watch me do solo after solo always felt weird. It did help having Porkchop here, like starting the recording over for me, so I didn't have to put the guitar down. But I kind of like the all-nighters, so I ended up redoing it later on. Before I did, though, I went and saw Neil Young and Crazy Horse in concert in Alpharetta in Atlanta, and got tickets real down up close. A lot of my like post-divorce splurges are solo trips to concerts where I spent the amount that I used to spend on 2 tickets on 1 ticket and got to sit way up close. Neil Young, I'd seen him before, but I'd never seen him with Crazy Horse. They're probably my favorite band of all time. And like as far as inspiration, I talked a ton about Tom Waits on this podcast already, but like that quiet, loud thing, going from stripped down acoustic to a roaring electric guitar, like that is all out of the Neil Young handbook. And a lot of like his music, like when I talk about artists that I just go back to over and over and over again and have for 15 years, I still remember the first time like I listened to a Neil Young record. There's a record store in Clemson called Yesterdays.
Yeah,
and
we played there.
Yeah, well, that's after they moved to Seneca. Shout out to Mike. He's still up there. Go check him out. He's got all kinds of good stuff. Mike's a cool dude. But they used to be in this little like upstairs shop in downtown Clemson. And when I was in school at Clemson, I would go down there and hang out and talk to Mike. And Rainbow Records used to be here in Anderson, and I would go there and talk to Mark. Hanging out at the record store traditionally is what I've done with my spare time when it wasn't like drinking and acting a fool.
Yeah.
And so I would go through the used bins and stuff, and I came across Neil Young's Zuma, and I asked Mike, I was like, is this worth listening to? My thing was like, I thought I was supposed to hate Neil Young because of Leonard Skinner, and we've discussed this a little bit in this podcast already. And Mike was like, if you don't know that, buy it and go listen to it now. And the record store guys, I spent so much time up there, we generally had a handshake rule that if I didn't like something, I could bring it back and just use it for store credit to get something else, you know? So I never worried about like wasting a dime at the record store. It was always either it was going to be good or I was going to get to go back and shop again. And I remember riding down the road, like the first time I heard Cortez the Killer, and it like changed my life. Like it was one of those things where it was like I didn't know music could be like this. History rock, like give me the history rock. So I finally get to see Neil Young with Crazy Horse. He's up there, old black, his 57 gold top Les Paul, he's spray painted black, a guitar amp that's running way too much power through the amp that it's built to handle, so it's all like twisted and distorted. He's obviously like built his pedal board out of sheet metal by hand, you know. Like Neil Young is the ultimate of all of this, and here I am like buying my first pedals and like really getting into my rig, and I go let Neil Young just blast my face off from 10 rows back. Probably had an effect on the record. I was also like listening to all of his stuff. I listened to like all of my favorite records of his over and over before and after to get prepared. And then I came back. I bought another guitar pedal called Ledges Reverb, which is from Earthquaker Devices 2, which gave me a whole bunch of different reverb settings that I could switch. So then I got to like have my sounds, like the sounds that I can imagine from my guitar. I got my like Neil Young, Old Black, over distorted Night Terrors, like rhythm guitar sound. And then I got like my Rolling Stones, like a little bit brighter, crunchy, like Keith Richards rhythm sound. And then I've got like my spacey Pink Floyd sound. And then my setup for my acoustic guitar. And all of this is now all on my pedal board, and I can easily switch back and forth to everything. And so once I had all of that, I saw the Neil Young show, and then I just sat here forever and dialed in the pedal board. I pretty much got it to exactly where I use it now. So I had some notes on this too in the book I thought were interesting. I'll read those to you now. It's funny how resistant I've been to pedals, considering how much I like to organize shit. That's really what this has been. All I'm really doing is using the pedals to emulate the sounds I've been trying to get out of my amp, and then setting it up so I can access them with the tap of my foot. I think the next one up is going to be an EQ. Yeah, exactly. I don't know why I always felt like there was something synthetic about using a guitar pedal, when really all it's doing is keeping me from having to go back to my amp and switch buttons around to try to get the same damn thing. It's mind-blowing. I'm so glad that I did it. I don't know why it took me 15 years of a musical career to get to this point. All right, so one of my favorite parts of this song is the intro to the tune. And we pretty much arranged this like as a three-piece and how we were going to do it before we ever started recording. So we got to think about the intro in every layer of what we were recording in the song. So instead of me like coming up with a guitar intro and then you guys figuring out what to do around it, I knew when I started recording the guitar, when I started recording the drums, what you guys were going to be doing too. So I got to kind of play to that. And I think it creates an intro here that's it's pretty different from anything else that's on the record. And it really sounds more like we're all playing together and playing off of each other, even though we recorded separately, because in our heads, we knew what the other people were doing. On the electric guitar, I'm playing jazz chords. I knew Nolin was going to like that. So pretty much I'm playing like a different inversion of the same chord that I'm going to play through the song, but I'm playing it up the neck. I think I'm playing the shape that I learned playing Take 5, which is the hardest song that I've ever learned on guitar, and I still can't half play it. But I did learn that one cool chord shape, and when we used to play with Joe, that was like the shape that he moved up and down the neck every song he played. And so I kind of start out playing these different inversions of the chords, and I'm playing them open, and I'm like really letting them ring. And you'll hear I'm going to start like with just these open chords on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then about 3/4 of the way through, after 3 ones, I start playing the full picking pattern. I think the guitar sounds really good right there. It's a nice spacey
very pretty
tone. So then, as the guitar is doing this, and it's kind of jumping in about 3/4 of the way through, the bass kind of slinks around the guitar, sort of using those James Jamerson octaves that we had just been recently playing with, and Porkchop had just recently learned how to do. So you wait till we go through the whole intro before you start to your regular. So The bass is all the way through playing something different. The guitar plays something different 3/4 of the way through, and then switches to the regular strum. I really love the way these two instruments work off of each other, though. And when you hear those two things in isolation, they sound a certain way. But when you listen to them together, they feel like they're flowing in and out of each other. Really nice bass work there, Porkchop.
Thank you.
So the bass goes the full intro without playing the regular rhythm. The guitar goes 3/4. The drums come in halfway through the intro, so you don't hear them at all until halfway through. And then what the sax does is kind of plays against the bass. So you're playing like a single note and holding it for all 4 beats.
Yeah.
And then the note that you're playing creates a chord with the bass, right? So like what you two guys are doing kind of frame the guitar chord that's going through the middle. So you're sort of playing the high note on the chord, and Porkchop's playing the low note on the chord.
Oh, I like to hang around the 9, if that makes any sense. You know about the 7th and the you can create a lot of dissonance by playing. It's basically just a second, but above all the other lower stuff that's already been played. So like, I'm a sax player. I can only play one note at a time, and I envy people that play guitar and piano and stuff like that. You get all those pretty notes together. So what I try to do is just try to find something that's a little bit different that can fill out the chord.
Yeah.
So that's kind of was, I guess, basically my goal for, I guess what you're about to talk about.
Yeah. So it's almost dendrological in the way that it stacks up, even though we didn't really talk about it that way. But what you're saying is you're like, it really is. Porkchop is underneath. He's the roots. Yeah. And the guitar strum is the trunk. And then what you're playing is the
I can hit
limbs.
those one note that'll make that whole chord a whole different chord.
Absolutely. And it creates like this drag in the beginning. Like that tension kind of holds through for a long time. And what that does is when we do all fall into line and start playing, it creates this sort of release, like it flows into the song. I really enjoyed that. And like listening back to it, prepping for this show, like that was one of the things that stood out, is just how it feels when everything like falls into place and the song finally starts moving. So let's go ahead and play it for everybody else. Let's dive in. Just make sure to listen to what we're talking about in the intro. Hopefully you can hear it. From Fall Down Tree's debut album, Night Terrors, this is the 7th track, Deadbeat Dads.
What good is an apology if you don't really mean it? If it's not a sincere plea for forgiveness? What good is calling it the past when we have to relive it? Is it really love at all if you can take it away? Just think of all the deadbeat dads that never had a chance.
Deadbeat Dads from the Fall Down Trees debut record, Night Terrors, now available on all streaming services, wherever you find free music that you don't have to pay for. Go listen to the record. One thing I forgot to mention here is there was a spot at the end of the solo where I was coming in for the chorus, I wonder where have all the good guys gone, they're sitting at home alone. That's a pretty solid line.
I can relate.
That's me too. So there's that spot where it sounded like all of the energy from the solo was dropping out before the vocals were coming back in. And so I actually changed the way that I was singing that from the first versions of the song that you heard, and I come in on top of the solo just a little bit early to carry that energy from the solo into that line of the song, and really like stressed it out for that part. I'm also going to say, Nolin, your sax playing is spectacular on this tune. Like, there's not a lot of it there, and we didn't really talk about it over the course of the recording other than the fact that you did it right. You were the only thing that sounded good the first recordings we did. But it comes in these very particular spots, right? Like, you have a little break, like it's a little bit of a solo there that you get to take, which is beautiful. And then the sax kind of leads in, like it's almost like there's gonna be a sax solo, and then the guitar like overtakes whatever's going on, and it gets real nasty. And then that spot at the very end where the sax and the guitar kind of, they're apart from each other and then sort of weave back in together to hit that final sweet note.
It's that argument. I said, we have arguments with everybody, but it's that resolve that is what matters the most, right?
Yeah, man, for sure.
Because like an argument's a lot like harmony. You all are coming from different, coming from two different areas. You may not agree on something, you may not, but the whole key of making music is to make harmony, and sometimes it resolves, sometimes it doesn't. And it's just like an argument. It's just like a relationship. Sometimes it doesn't resolve, and you gotta start over.
That's so true, man. It's like, first of all, it kind of calls back to Night Terrors, like that line in the song, like, what's the good if everyone's the same? Like, in a relationship, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, me and my ex, like, the music that we were into and the TV shows and the food that we liked and all of those things were exactly the same. But it's how the things that are different harmonize with each other that really matters in the long run.
Yeah, like I was talking about dissonance, it's still harmony.
Yeah, for sure. And it creates a tension, and very similar to that relationship tension. I think that's a beautiful metaphor. Chop, do you have a metaphor this show like you usually do that can compare to that?
Well, just off what you guys were talking about, if everybody's playing the same note, so to speak, or thinking the same thing or saying the same thing in a relationship, it's no different than a mantra.
Yeah.
Mantras can be beneficial if at certain times, but if all you did was chant mantras in your life, that gets monotonous and pretty annoying pretty quick, just like it can in relationships.
Yeah.
And what you said earlier about how the differences that people have are in music, how they harmonize together. I think that's beautiful. I mean, because that is music, that is life. And,
exactly.
I couldn't have said it better.
You look at the three of us and our backgrounds and how different we are, and we can come together to create a thing that works together, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of the pieces are working towards a goal. What you said about the mantra part, like, that reminds me of what we were talking about with Water Finds Its Way, and almost how, like, that chorus of that song is me trying to convince myself. And it also ties into the religious aspects of Shoot the Messenger. A lot of what religion is faith, right? And it's you believing, you convincing yourself that this thing is real, that things work out in the end. Water Finds Its Way is the same thing. Even though he doesn't really believe it, and he almost makes fun of it in the last verse, it's him trying to convince himself. And a lot of times that's what a mantra is too. But eventually it can become empty. Right? Eventually it is just going through the motions, and it's the extra layers in the character, and when they become a harmony, that really provides the depth and something that's completely fulfilling when you don't have to use the mantra anymore.
Yeah, it's after the mantra, after you're done chanting the mantra, what do you do with the rest of the time that you have?
Absolutely. All right. Well, I don't know, like, as far as shows go, I've been waiting to see what feedback is like. Nobody's heard Shoot the Messenger yet, so I'm sure our thoughts on religion are going to get us a whole lot of shit for that one. I see that coming. I'm sure all of the talk that we had about men is going to get us some shit on this one, and that's perfectly all right. Look, we're coming from a place of love. We don't judge anybody based on their beliefs or how they cope with the world. We just judge them based on how they treat other people, and we hope you treat other people nice. We love women. All three of us are very fond of at least woman, if not multiple.
one in particular for me. One in particular. Hey,
Glad
Connie.
that you clarified that. We want everybody to be okay. We want people to have equal opportunity in the world. We support women's rights as a whole. But you know, our goal with talking about this stuff, and I hope you could hear that it was pretty difficult. The goal with talking about it is to make it easier to talk about, and just keep in mind that guys are people too, and even though we might not express ourselves emotionally in the same way, we still have those emotions, and you know,
everyone has a story.
That's exactly right. Treat people with kindness. Just go ahead and assume that they've dealt with their own traumas. Don't rank traumas or believe that other people's aren't just as real if they don't seem to be as bad as yours. And for God's sake, the little guys, like, look after them. Don't force them to grow up with a sense of self-loathing just because of who they are. That's what we really care about. And thanks for listening to Does It Make a Sound? We'll be back in a couple of weeks with episode 8, The Setting Sun, where my editing skills get put to the test and Nolin takes a stand against fascism.
Oh my God.
In the meantime, please like, subscribe, and review the show on your favorite podcasting platform. Stay up to date with Does It Make a Sound and Fall Down Trees by following Fall Down Trees on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Links are in the description of this podcast. As independent artists, we need patrons, just like the folks, the greatest, like the Renaissance, like that era. I was thinking about this because we have a new pope, and you know, I don't think about popes at all until one of them dies. So, you know, the greatest artistic revolution in the history of the world, what was going on at that point in time, it was in fashion to patronize the artists. And so artists got to create and were not just supported to the point of being able to live, but lived relatively lavishly because of their ability to create kind of from the soul. And so we need our very own patrons of that sort. So please, all we're asking right now, we're not trying to raise any money yet. We will eventually. But as of right now, all we're asking is just share. Share the show, share your thoughts about the show, share it with people privately that you think will like it, but pop it up on your social channels too. Try to help us out, spread the word, and we'll keep creating stuff because we don't have any other choice, as I've also expressed in the show today. Does It Make a Sound and Fall Down Trees are proud partners with Guttersville Records, a collective of independent artists working together to be heard in a noisy digital space. So please like and subscribe to the Guttersville channels too, and make sure to listen to all of the music coming out on our little indie label. Go listen to the other episodes of Does It Make a Sound if you haven't already, and go stream Night Terrors. When was the last time? Have you listened to it this week? If you haven't listened this week, you need to listen now. Just go stream it. Or don't even listen. Just turn your speakers down and play it over and over on loop so we get the plays.
That's what I do.
Thanks, Nolin. And thank you, folks, for listening to the show and for all of your support. For Porkchop Branch and Nolin McAlister, I'm Dustin Owens.